Thank you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having me. I really am always moved by this. It always centers me. It brings me back and makes me reflective of God's work in our work. I've been doing this a long time, 37 years. I heard you say that. I said, oof, the year I'll be coming out in a walker. Not that there's anything wrong with a walker. But you know, before I speak and talk to a group, I'm reminded of an experience that I had in 1985. We opened up our first transitional living program. Usually, Covenant House, we deal with homeless and runaway youth, as you know, and as we started, it was a crisis center. Get them in, clean them up, try to move them on because more and more kids were coming. But this was a new program. We were going to keep them in our home and give them a home environment, let them stay for a year and get to school and get educated, and we're really going to give them a space to grow. Really exciting. In 1985, it was kind of a new thing. Now it's all over the world. But they said, Jim, you're going to do the first night meeting. So I was honored. This is great. I'm going to talk to our young people. And I did some real thinking, and I was going to really inspire them, see? I was going to wow them. I had my cassette player. You remember that cassette? It's a thing with you know that one, right? Yeah. No, some don't, see? Frightening. I had my cassette player, and I was going to play Dream the Impossible. You know that one? To fight the... Right, I was going to wow them. They were going to love me. And I had a moment of grace. And for me, often grace comes sometimes in a sunset or a sunrise, but often God's invitation to me is a grab in the keister. And I stopped because I looked in their faces and I knew their stories. I knew that Jose lived behind a dumpster for 30 days before he had the courage to believe that he was good and deserved a different life. Dion, who came home from school and his mother had ran away from him, was lost in the streets of New York. And then he found the goodness in himself and thought, maybe, just maybe, I deserve something more. James, who lived in Staten Island, big, tall kid, all his brothers were in Rikers. And he thought maybe, just maybe, he was good enough to live a life different. And I wanted them to like me. Not God's grace. Not what God called me to be. About myself. So you got to get out of the way to let the Spirit work through you. Because when it's all about you, when it's all about me, I get in the way. Pierre, I remember, young kid. When Pierre came into us, we said, Pierre, where are you from? He said, here and there on the Lower East Side. We knew that meant male prostitution. We knew that he was selling himself just to get through the day. And here he was in front of us, doubting his own goodness, doubting his own worthiness, and I was about me. Thank God for God's grace. They never heard to dream the impossible dream, never hit the buttons. That's how I used to hit the buttons, you know, remember? Yeah. You're recording, you're supposed to be playing. Remember that? Remember that, right? Yeah. They never heard it. What they did do was tell their stories, their God stories, their gospel stories, who they were in the world and where they thought they wanted to be. And they kind of had this cool thing where they tried to outdo each other of who had it harder on the street. A little competition. And then we started to talk about their dreams, and that's when they cried. That's when they got shaky. Could it really be true? And so we create this environment. So I'd ask you to pray with me that I can get out of the way, that somehow through God's grace, God's mercy, that I can be out of the way, and somehow through God's Spirit, we're moved and touched and know that we're good, that we know that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. This is our work at Covenant House. It's to get out of the way. to let God do God's work. Do our piece. We often say we all have a piece. You're a very important piece, but you're just a piece. Just a piece. So let us pray for a moment, just a moment, so that I can get out of the way. Great, thank you. I want to talk to you about our kids. I love to talk about these courageous young people. There's a darkness to their lives often. A darkness. 25% of our young people have traded sex just to get through the day. It's called survival sex. 25%. For 10% to 15% are victims of human trafficking. That's what they experience. There's a thing called the ACE score. It measures childhood trauma. Adverse childhood experiences, it stands for. It's a big, long, longitudinal study, been around for 35 years. They say if you get a 4 on the score, you have trauma, and it affects your development, your biopsychosocial, it affects the whole thing. 4. Our average number is 5.5. Our kids have seen horror. They've seen it. They've lived it. We listen to it. But that's not what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about their divineness, their goodness. They're funny. They're courageous. They're resilient. I was talking to one kid, I said, you got to be a lawyer, man. Every time we give you a rule, you're fighting us on the rule. You'll be a great attorney. Just doesn't let go. You know, when I listen to some of their stories and what they've seen, and they see me in the morning and they say good morning, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. For what you see, what they've experienced, the fact that they're even smiling, that they even think they have a future. If it was me, I think I'd stay in bed, throw the covers over, and stay there. So inspiring, our young people, and we try to meet them there. There's a big thing going on now in our care and working with young people. We've gotten a lot smarter in our day. There's a thing called trauma-informed, and it's a good thing, right? You understand the trauma, and you understand how it affects their lives. But that's not where we should start. At a Covenant House, we start with blessing-informed, divinity-informed, that their goodness, who they are, is what's essential and important. Because when we know we're good and we know we're worthy, then we can start on the darkness. But we have to start, as the Bible starts with, and it was good. He made this and it was good. And he made you and you're good. And you got some work to do. Like us all, huh? Like us all, if you're like me. So this work has really grown. When we first started, 37, well, it's more than that. It started before me. And everyone thinks I was there breaking ground, but I wasn't. But what has really come, and we've grown, we're in 6 countries now. 6 countries. We're in Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexico. Hey, I got applause. I thought all applause was gone with Abby. And we're in Toronto, and we're in many cities in the United States. We've really kind of expanded. And what that's grown out of is a love and devotion and commitment to our young people. There's no program that we've developed that's a government program where we write a grant, we get the money, and then we implement it, although there's some of those. But most of it is to say, what does this beautiful soul need? We try to look at them just as you look at your children, right? What does your kid need? What's the loving thing to do? That's our question. That's our question. What's the loving thing to do here? For the young person in the community, the house, that's always our question, always our invitation. What's the loving thing to do? And I think that's part of all our life's journey, right? What's the loving thing to do? And I think we don't always have the answers. I think we have to always kind of see, because sometimes we learn that our kids need a kiss, and they need to be told they're divine. And sometimes they need a kick and tell to get to school, right? And so we need to be able to ask, what's the loving thing to do? And that's part of what we do. But we need to see their goodness. One of the beautiful things about growing up Catholic is I know paradox. I know it. We all know it. divine or human, bread or body, wine or blood, human or divine. We can hold those things. It's part of our Catholic faith. How beautiful is that? We can hold the darkness and the beauty all together. So we're positioned as young people come in broken, angry, frightened. We can hold that. Blessed, divine, special. We can hold that too. How lucky are we to be given this lineage to know to hold both things. We're blessed to do that. I want to tell you a little bit about me, not because it's all about me, but why not? No, I thought I'd share with you my own little story, my own broken journey, right? You know, I grew up in Queens, Flushing. And could I get a hoot? Yeah, come on, just boom. Flushing lives. Yeah. I don't know if it does anymore, but anyway, I grew up in Flushing and was taught by the Franciscans who influenced me greatly, and I wanted to give back. I wanted to do something, but let's not get crazy. I didn't go to the Peace Corps. I took the 7 train from Queens down to Manhattan and signed up for the faith community at Covenant House. And I was, I had the party because I was going off to help the poor, right? So had a few of those. That's what we do in Flushing, right? We party. And I took the train down and I went into formation where for a month, we learned about Liturgy of the Hours, we learned about prayer, we learned about our church, we learned about faith and prayer. Beautiful. But I'm ready to go because I got to get going. So they posted the list outside of your assignment. Jim White, mailroom. What? Mailroom? And that was a bad day. Like, I don't know if you ever, when they put the marks up and you see, C, D, F, that's kind of what I was feeling. And I'm in the mailroom. And I spent weeks, they'd bring in envelopes, and I had to categorize them by zip code. I didn't know I had dyslexia until that moment. Could you ever try to think? Anyway, it was not good. So I'm starting to think about, how do I get out of here? Like, what can I do? What story can I tell the troops back in Flushing so they welcome me home and not leave me out in the curb? And I wasn't coming up with anything. And so I was coming home, and they said, "You're going to go to Mass tonight?" I said, "I know, I got to go to Mass. We always go to Mass. We have to go to Mass." They said, "Well, put your seatbelt on. Father Ned's coming." So this priest came in, and he had a house up in the Bronx. I think it's not far from here, where he housed 8 boys. And this was going to be a memorial Mass for one of the boys who died. His name was Sonny. He jumped in front of the A train and killed himself. That's not an unfamiliar story for us. But Ned brought in the other boys who lived with him, sat them in the front row. They all were cleaned up and heads down as they lost a brother. And then he brought in another guy, Sal, who was Sonny's sugar daddy. Yeah, not okay, right? That's what I thought. Some of the people in our community left. They were outraged. How dare you bring somebody like that into our Mass? And Ned said the Mass. And when he gave the homily and he gave his kid's eulogy, he wept. As he got through the tears, he talked about this kid who was funny and delightful, recognizing his divinity. And all the kids cried too. I'm just watching. And then we had the kiss of peace and the Eucharistic prayer, and we stood around in circles and held hands. And Ned said it with such beauty and with such reverence. And then we broke hands, and we went for the kiss of peace. And Ned left the circle. He went over to this man whose eyes never left his shoes in shame. And he took his hands and he lifted him up. He put his arms around him. And this man put his head on the chest of this priest in his green, beautiful garment and rubbed the back of his head as the man wept. And I looked at this and I said, I'm staying. If God's love can be this big, if God's mercy that endures forever is really true, I'm sticking around. There's something to be learned about God's love that's even bigger than that. We can spend time in judgment, as we do. But I saw something that was so transformative to me. That was 37 years ago. And I stayed to see God's compassion and mercy in the work of thousands of lives. Lucky me. Thank God a week after they took me out of the mailroom. I don't know what I was going to do. But I want to tell you a little bit more about that story too. My dad had Huntington's chorea, a terrible degenerative disease, and he was home, and I was home. And part of coming to Covenant House was to run away from my father's illness. Not proud of that. I only really realized it. We used to pray 2 hours a day. You pray 2 hours a day, you find stuff out, don't you? And in reflection and prayer and some help with spiritual direction, I realized that my coming to Covenant House was a runaway. I ran away from the pain and the suffering that was in my home. I couldn't handle it or deal with it. Couldn't take care of my father. I figured, hey, who's going to give me crap if I go down and help the poor? Not a good thing. I remember going to my dad, who now is in a hospital bed, barely being able to talk. I crawled in. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Dad. I left you. Should have been there for you. In his difficult way, he reached out and put his arm around me, kissed my cheek, and almost giggled and said, no, 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 no. God has you. You're doing God's work. I'm fine. So proud of you. You know, if you never needed God's mercy, I don't know if you get it. But if you have, lucky you. Lucky you. Spend a lot of time with broken souls and broken hearts, people involved in addiction, caught up. And most of the people I know who've been able to transcend the beast through God's mercy are thankful for their addiction. You know those people? I kind of go, you're weird. How beautiful are they? They know that it is only through their own brokenness, their own giving it to God. God's mercy endures forever. Here's the paradox, remember? I came kind of sneaking out of Dodge, right, from my dad. God works in it. God works in it. Through me, much has happened. I opened a program in Guatemala for trafficked girls, 12. There's now 65. There's thousands of kids that I've been part of in creating environments for programs. Through my brokenness, God works. How cool is that? And that is our message. Isn't that our story? It's through God's grace, not our grace, even our brokenness, that God transcends, that God transcends. You know, I hope that this conference for you, it's always, for me, it's this, that great Eastern prayer, right? Lord, comfort me in my afflictions, right? We want to be comforted sometimes. And this conference, this divine mercy allows us to kind of rest, to know, right, that God holds us. It's in his mercy. We can trust that. We can let go. We also are left with a little bit of a challenge, because the other side of the prayer is, comfort me in my afflictions and afflict me in my comfort. Remember that one? Yeah? We need that. Don't you need that? I need that. An invitation to deeper faith. An invitation that God holds us all. That's what we're invited to in our faith. When I was a young guy, they asked me to do outreach. I said, that's going to be fun. It's not. Check the box. No, lie. Bad advertising. I'm a young man, right? So I'm 25 maybe. And I'm in the van, and we go around the streets of New York City. We stop at Grand Central. At that time, there was a huge homeless population living in the aisles, and we'd walk down and see, look for young people. And we'd walk along the wall with your back to the wall. So you learned all these techniques, see? And we'd go there. We'd go to the Loop. the Loop, which was up in the 50s. You wouldn't know it if you were a person walking through. But we know our kids. We love our kids. We listen. And we knew that that was where the young male prostitutes walked around and people picked them up. And we'd go there and open up our van, and they'd come in out of the cold, and we listened to them, watched them, invited them to come to Covenant House, waiting and praying that they would. And then we went down to the west side, and then the east side. And the east side was a real place where young kids would hang out and sleep, and we'd try to get some kids from there. That was a real hot spot. And then we'd go to the meat packing section. And I don't know, I mean, now you can't get a drink for under $25 there. It's crazy. Not that I've ever gone there. But back in the day, when we did outreach, that's where the transvestites were. And as a 25-year-old kid from Queens, went to St. Mary's and Mary's Nativity. We didn't have a lot of transvestites. Yeah, no. And we'd open up the van door and in they'd come. And I got to tell you, I got the heebie-jeebies. I mean, it just was not comfortable or cool. And I didn't know what to do. So I went to my spiritual director. She was a nun. Spectacular. This big, this white. Just great. Loved her. And she was special. But she was one of these nuns, you know. I don't know, sisters, if you're one of these nuns, but we need those nuns. They're like, I'm going to tell you straight, right? So I go to sister, yeah. So I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm standing there like this, and I want to get out of the van, and it's part of our ministry, and da-da-da. And she said, you don't know what to do, huh? She said, I got an idea. Don't just do something. Stand there. Be there. And if you're nervy enough, look into their eyes and see their divinity. What? Sister, I was trying to help you tell me to get out of the van, you know. Help me get the buckle off. No. Stand there. Don't fix them. Don't twist them. Don't proselytize to them or whatever. Sit and see them in their divinity. So around we go with the loop, and here I go. And you do what the sister tells you, don't you? I do. I learned. It was really hard, and I sat there. I had to leave my judgment outside the van. That was not easy. And I had to take a look into their eyes. And I had a moment of God's grace. These peculiar people had amazing courage. They were trying to find where they stood in the world. That's not such a bad thing. And in many times when I look at them, I thought they were more courageous than me. They were hated by society. They were the outcasts. The outcasts. What would Jesus do? If he made judgments on Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus would still be up in the freaking tree. No? Yeah? Still be up there. I'm hanging out with him. He's a tax collector. The woman at the well, the sinful woman, she'd still be with a bucket. No. Don't just do something. Stand there and see the divinity and let God do what God does. Let God judge. Let me see their specialness somehow. Giving the bologna sandwich. We gave bologna sandwiches. This thick bologna. They scoured them. And just to be there. And so that is the invitation. I know we want to move to judgment. I do. But God is working in this. God is working in this, and that's what we have to trust. And the young workers who come to us and don't get that, they last about 18 months. We put their crap in a bag and we send them home because they don't get it. They can't see that they're just a piece, an important piece, just a piece. We're part of the fabric of this thing called God's love. If we dare to get out of the way and see the goodness in the world, we're all invited to that. I call it the holy invitation. I hate it sometimes, right? because you have to get out of the way. You have to know and trust that God is loving these young people, these broken people, just like me. Just like me. Thank God my Father showed me kindness and mercy when I didn't deserve it. That's what mercy is, by the way. You don't deserve it. And that's what we're promised. That's the beauty of it. If you read the stuff in the Divine Mercy, the last few lines talks about its promise to us is joy. The world is in a dark place. But if we trust that God holds it all, we can be people of joy. We have to be that peace, though, of love, of courage, and be true to ourselves and stand up for what we believe. But most importantly, see the divinity in our brothers and sisters who are a little peculiar. You have that neighbor who's a little wackadoodle? Yeah? That's called the Holy Invitation. So lucky for you. Welcome. You're welcome. They're your person. That's your invitation to love. And you know, it's funny. I had another thing that happened to me. I was working and I had a real difficult time, and somebody really didn't like me. Can you believe that? The nerve. Really didn't like me, trying to get me fired. And I remember going to my spiritual director. I told you about her, right? And you know what she said? She goes, "I'm so excited for you." I had tears in my eyes. She goes, "They're trying to get me fired." She goes, "I'm so happy for you." She's losing it. She says, "I'm so happy for you. Now you have an invitation to love your enemies." Oh, you want to be a man of faith, right? You want to do the Catholic Christian thing. Well, here's your chance. So excited. I want to give her a crack. But we all have that holy invitation, don't we? You're going to get it getting back on the bus. Someone's going to step in front of you and steal your sandwich. I'm so happy for you. I hope they take your pickle too. You're going to get to love them. And here's the thing that she told me as I was leaving. She always saved that curveball for the end. You know, when you remember Columbo? He'd give it to you at the end. This was this nun. This is what she'd do. And she'd say, "Oh, Jimmy," she said. She called me Jimmy. She said, "Oh, but you can't do it." I said, "You just told me to do it. Now you're telling me what are you doing to me?" She goes, "Of course you can't love your enemies. You need God. You need God's mercy. Go pray for them. You can't do it. I can't do it. I need to trust and to turn it to God. I need to be an instrument of His peace." Because, you know, you want to whack the person, right? Don't get on the bus ahead of you. But that's our invitation, and we have to go to God and ask God to help us, to heal us, to help us see the goodness and the divinity in our enemies. We can't do it. It's a paradox. You can't. You're right. That's why we pray. That's why we connect to the Holy Spirit. That's why we connect to God, so God can help us to see the goodness and to release and let go. Yeah, I think that's my hey, I got an applause. I want to be true to the time so I don't get the hook. I want to tell you maybe one more story. You know, there are dark days at Covenant House. Some days you feel like you're shooting at the caboose. You know that one? You feel like you're trying. We just had 3 of our kids murdered in about a 4-month period. And it really can take the wind out of your sails. You know, you feel like we're going that way. And we're constantly invited. Again, this is what we call the holy invitation, because it's hard. You know, it's difficult. So what do you do with that, you know? So you pray, and you ask for God's grace, God's mercy. And they asked me to go down and give a talk in Asbury Park, New Jersey, which is down the shore, and I'm up north in the summertime. So I got to drive in traffic 2 hours and change, give a 10-minute thanks for coming, get back in the car, and drive 2.5 hours home. Holy invitation, right? So I get in the car, and off I go, and I go down, and I got a little bit of ants in my pants. Like, okay, where's the mic? Let's go. Let's move it. I got to get back on the parkway. And everybody's driving down. I got bicycles, they're hanging off the back, and I'm going, yeah, I'm not going there. So I go down, and it's in a church. We're doing a sleep out. We do these sleep outs. You're all invited. Come and sleep out in the street in solidarity with homeless youth. Not a lot of hands. But I hope you join us. We're doing one soon. Women sleep out. So it's a sleep out, and 45 people came. Now 45 people. I said, 45 people? I drove. Anyway, the story's in your head. They get dark, right? And so they said, oh, you got to meet this woman. She's the head of the church here that we're sleeping in. And I said, all right. They said, you'd love her. And I said, what is she doing? Oh, well, she shows us where the bathroom is. She's told us we can't use the kitchen. She's the church lady. I said, oh, we'll call her Veronica. So I meet Veronica, and she grabs my hands, and she looks at me with tears starting to swell. And she says, were you there in the 80s? Girl, I was there in the 80s. And she said, I was a kid. And I lived under the George Washington Bridge. And I lived there for 3 months. And I ate out of the garbage. My mother burnt me with cigarette butts, and I had it. So I ran away as a young girl. And the outreach van would come around. That wasn't my shift up under the bridge. I was lower Manhattan. But I knew those people. She said, I stayed out there, and they'd come, and I didn't trust anybody. I mean, my own mother couldn't care for me. Who else was going to care? And then finally, it was so damn cold, I decided to come in, and the outreach workers brought me in. And they gave me a bed, and they gave me soap and a towel, and this worker sat down next to me, and she said, you are so courageous. Most people couldn't stand what you stand as a young 16-year-old girl. You are special, and you're going to be fine. She took this blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders. Now, I lived back there, back in the day. Those blankets, they were crap. Those blankets were like, when you get the U-Haul truck and you got to wrap your furniture, and it's like itchy kind of, that's what we had, right? So she wraps this blanket around this young woman. And she said, I wish I could remember her name. I can't remember her name, but she changed my life. She said, I'm a grandmother now. I have 3 children. 2 of my boys are in college. My girl is a mom with a young little baby. 3 children, she said. And when I brought them home from the hospital, I wrapped them in that blanket. I wrapped them in the Covenant House blanket that was given to me as a young girl. And I just brought home my grandson, and I wrapped him in it too. Shut me up. God's grace again. I love to tell that story to our staff because all they did was give a blanket, and I know that worker was like, okay, here's a blanket for you, and ran off to do something else and didn't know the beautiful gift that was given in love and compassion to the least of our brothers, to this extraordinary young girl who took this blanket and said, I am good. Maybe I am divine. Maybe I am worthy. And started on that track. She was given love in a bad green blanket. See, we don't know God's work. That's the message, in case you didn't get it. We don't know what God's doing in kindness and in love. It was just a blanket, and it was itchy. But it was more than that. It was given in love and mercy. And let God do what God does. Let us give blankets. Let us give kindness. Let us show compassion to the person who's cutting us off on the bus. Or wherever we find the holy invitation. I promise you it's coming. It's coming. Maybe not on the bus, but when you get off. So how blessed are we to be tooled with the wisdom and the knowledge that we can go to our knees. We can go to our knees. We can trust that God's working in it. How blessed are we to know this is our invitation. So when you start to get quirky and you get frustrated with someone, or maybe, if you're like me, you get frustrated with your own self, you can go to your beads, you can say your prayers, and ask for God's divine mercy. Lucky you. Amen.